Welcome to this sample audio clip, which comes from the series entitled Multihull Conversations with Jim Brown. In this segment, Jim speaks to Multihull sailor and former Sea Runner trimaran owner Fred Goldfarb.
Our guest today is Fred Goldfarb, who is an old Sea Runner trimaran sailor whom I have never met, but I've heard of his exploits for years. Hello, Fred.
Hi, Jim.
We've got a lot of catching up to do, boy. I remember your name from way back. I guess, did you buy plans or something back in the 60s?
Well, I bought a couple of your catalogs over the years. And it turns out I never actually built one of your boats, but I own two of them. I bought my first Sea Runner trimaran, a 25, from a guy who was a teacher turned yacht dealer on Long Island, Denny Blaze.
Oh, I know him, sure.
Yeah, he was a good guy, maybe had some notoriety off and on.
Yeah.
And he ended up living on a catamaran, I think, down in the Chesapeake or down in Florida, teaching captain's course lessons.
Yes, he was a kingpin in the Long Island Multihull Association, and invited me to come up for one of their races. It was quite a scene.
Yeah, I was a member of that I wasn't a member. I would have been, but it had already broken up when I first got into Multihull seriously. But I met a bunch of the guys who were in there. And,
I think that must have been the early or middle 70s, huh?
It was, I guess, about
late
the mid-70s when I got Flying Cloud.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And
that
Flying
was
Cloud,
which
boat was, pardon me, I stepped on you there. Which was Flying Cloud?
Flying Cloud was my Brown, the Sea Runner 25. I don't remember what the original name was, but I renamed it.
Uh-huh.
And I kept it at a yacht club on City Island, where I couldn't race it against anything because I wouldn't like it racing against anything else.
The 25 was a pretty quick boat for its time, wasn't it? It really did sail.
Well, I can tell you that a friend of mine who was, I'm about 6 feet tall, and a friend of mine was about 6'3". We were off sailing between the Whitestone and Throgs Neck bridges in the Upper East River, not far from City Island one day. And we were heading back towards Long Island Sound, and a gust of wind hit us. I remember we were on a starboard tack. I think it was close hauled or maybe a beam reach. And the boat accelerated so fast that my friend was knocked off his feet.
Did he stay on board?
Oh yeah, it was in the cockpit, but it was like slamming the accelerator on a sports car.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what we were doing, but it felt like we were doing something like 7 to 12 knots in a matter of seconds.
Well,
maybe more.
It can work the other way too, Fred. I once watched my old friend Fred Jukic sailing with Arthur Piver, and they were going across San Francisco Bay, lickety-split, and Fred was standing up on the weather outrigger hull, hanging onto the shroud. And the shroud broke right in his hand, and the mast went over the side, and the boat stopped rather quickly. And Fred went tiptoeing out over the float bow and into the water.
Well, I never went swimming, luckily. And I did have a mast break on me in that boat.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was a wooden mast that was of such a section that I believe it was probably meant more for like a 31. It was a huge section. And I'd been sailing with a girlfriend at the time, and we were off City Island late afternoon, and I guess had to be a starboard tack. I heard a crack, and the upper part of the mast fell on the port ama and the netting and so forth, and the rest of it kind of fell back and sort of on the port or over the port side seat, so it missed us. But it's pretty exciting. I ended up designing and building a new, thinner, lighter mast that worked just fine.
Well, do you suppose it was a mast failure or was it a rigging failure?
It was a mast failure. The mast was a wooden mast covered in fiberglass, and there had been some water that had gotten in from the very top, and you couldn't see the rot that had developed around the spreaders, around that part of the mast.
Yeah, geez. Well, I'm so glad nobody got hurt.
Oh, it was kind of funny though. We were fine. I just dropped the anchor. It wasn't it wasn't very deep there. And immediately a couple of monohullers came around. Just one guy started calling the Coast Guard Auxiliary, shooting off flares. And I'm telling him, don't, we're fine. My mooring's just a couple of 100 yards over there. We're going to be fine. And he insisted on it, and trying to get the military, everyone he can think of. And then luckily nobody came, and so we were on the radio a little bit, but it was a funny little incident. And my girlfriend at the time, she came sailing with me again.
You've got to tell us how it is that you managed to get going into multi-hulls in the first place.
Well, it's kind of funny. I was in college, and I had read an article that living aboard a boat could be cheaper than living on land. So I went with a girlfriend to the New York Boat Show at the Coliseum at the time. And this was, I guess, around 1968. And the powerboats had a lot of room, but they sort of reminded me of, I don't know, apartments on land and big smelly engines. It just bothered me. There were sailboats there. Some had their sails up, masts were up. It was a big place. And I was just floored by the beauty of them and the fact that some of them were easily, live-aboard boats. There were two couples in the cockpit of a 48-footer that were talking to the salesman, and I was on deck to hear just enough to get me hooked for life. They asked him how hard would it be for people like themselves to sail that boat across the Atlantic, and the dealer said, well, not too hard if they know what you're doing, which of course leaves a whole library of information and knowledge out and experience. That was in January. In March, I was at City Island at Sagman's learning to sail. Then I did some sailing on a couple of small racing boats out of a local yacht club. Then I met, and meanwhile, I was learning everything I can, and I had switched schools from electrical engineering to a mechanical engineering program that was with the Westland School of Yacht Design. So I decided to learn how to design boats and become an engineer. Meanwhile, I'd met a guy named Jean Lacombe who had been in the original Ostar, the single-handed transatlantic race, and he had sailed a 21-foot Golf across. And he taught me stuff I didn't know previously, like how to sail backwards, how to sail without a rudder, things like that. Plus, he was a really interesting character. At this point, I was well aware of multi-hulls. I wasn't crazy about heeling, even though most boats do that, most monohulls anyway. And I started looking at multi-hulls and getting Tri-Mariner magazine and getting connected with some of the people who had been with the Long Island Multihull Association. I went over to the major East Coast multi-hull dealer, Simmons Sailing, out, and I think it was in Patchogue, and I kind of talked my way on as many boats as I could and do as many things as I could with boats. And at some point then, I just said I have to get one, and I looked around, and there weren't a lot for sale around here. And I found the 25, took a look at it, said, I'm familiar with Jim Brown's designs. This is fantastic. And it was in reasonably good shape, so I bought it and had my first boat. And I joined a yacht club in City Island so I can keep it there on a mooring. And that's how I sort of got into it. From there, it sort of blossomed. I just fell in love with these crazy boats with more than one hull.
Yeah, that's what happens. You get I don't know whether it's in the brain or in the belly. You get a fire going. It sounds like you really became committed at a time when the culture of the modern multi-hull was really beginning to crank up, particularly in the New York area and in the San Francisco area.
Thanks for listening. To find out more about this historic multi-hull audio series, please visit us on the web at www.outrigmedia.com.